Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Explain This. I'm with the star of the show, Robin Riddle. Robin, how's it going?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm a little stressed. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little stressed, but you're going to tell me why that's not such a bad thing.
Yes.
Because you're going to explain cortisol, and that's a question we get all the time in the office. So cortisol, what is this thing?
Yes. Well, talking about stress, cortisol is commonly referred to as the stress hormone. And cortisol really gets a bad rep. So I kind of want to dive into what it is and why we actually need it and it's good for us. So we look at this level a lot. It's on our Cleveland Heart Panel. So, if we're reviewing that, we're always talking to patients about cortisol levels. But it is one that we draw separate from that as well. So cortisol is a hormone that's produced by your adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are these little pyramid-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys. Like I said, it's often referred to as the stress hormone, but it plays a part in really a lot of processes in the body. The type of hormone that it is, there are receptors for that hormone in almost every organ and tissue in the entire body.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that we need it, but again, you can see really quickly why it would be bad if we don't have enough or if we have too much. So normal functions of cortisol, what it's supposed to do for us in a perfect world, it regulates our stress response. So cortisol is released as your body kicks into that fight or flight mode. So we release adrenaline, we release cortisol. It controls metabolism for us. So in a perfect world, keeps our metabolism nice and happy. Suppresses inflammation. It regulates blood pressure, regulates blood sugar, and it controls our sleep-wake cycle.
Cortisol does?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of things that it does for us, and you can see why it'd be bad if it's off.
It is interesting because we talk about stress, in a negative way. You need to de-stress, you need to reduce stress, but there are you have to have it or else you're not going to get up and moving as you just explained there. So tell us a little bit more about cortisol. How do we measure it?
We do. So we look at blood levels on this. Going back, you mentioned stress. Everybody has stress.
Yeah.
So everybody's going to release cortisol. There's different types of stress, and depending on what type of stress you have going on, it's going to show what kind of cortisol release we're going to have. So there's acute stress, which is like the fight or flight. Exercise will do this. Exercise is seen as a stress to the body. Exercise releases cortisol, but that's not a bad thing. That's what's supposed to happen.
Interesting.
Cortisol is supposed to be released in those types of situations. And other acute things would be, you get a phone call that somebody in your family just got taken to the hospital, or you're driving and somebody swerves in front of you and you have to hit on your brakes. That's acute stress. So that's over and done quickly.
Is it like, is it a certain feeling like in your stomach or?
Oh yeah. That heart rate goes up and
for me, like if I'm driving and, if somebody just inadvertently gets like, you react really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's like cortisol kicking in.
It is that cortisol and adrenaline. Then you have chronic stress, which chronic stress is really what starts to put some dysfunction on your cortisol levels because we're never getting the relaxation after that fight or flight. Chronic stress is a huge issue, especially in America nowadays, because, you're trying to balance life. You're trying to balance work. You go home and you're stressed out about work. You go to work and you're stressed out about home. It's just a chronic all the time. You're laying in bed at 10 o'clock at night thinking about the email that you still need to respond to. That kind of stuff keeps that cortisol going when we don't want it to be going high. And so that starts to lead to a lot of dysfunction. And then physical health stress as well. So being sick, being overweight, things like that will cause dysregulation with cortisol.
So being overweight can be
it puts stress on the body, but then stress can also lead to being overweight. So it's that chronic cycle.
Okay.
Cortisol affects every system in the body. It's going to affect your nervous system, your immune system, your cardiovascular system, respiratory system, reproductive system. So stress is not good for reproduction. Musculoskeletal and your skin, hair, nails, your integumentary system. So whenever we have high stress, some people, their response is hair loss. Cortisol is affecting all of this. So like I said, in times of stress, cortisol is released to keep you on high alert, that fight or flight. It also is releasing extra glucose. So it's triggering the liver to release extra glucose out that can be used in the bloodstream for fast energy. in short spurts, it can boost the immune system because it suppresses inflammation. But when we get into longer term high cortisol, it actually is going to lead to increased inflammation and it's going to weaken the immune system. So short-term bursts of cortisol, super helpful. Long-term, suppressing the immune system, increasing inflammation. We're going to stay sick. We're going to stay inflamed.
Is there a way to have some sort of control over, these short bursts of cortisol so that, that's how you use it to your advantage?
Yeah.
Is there like a
controlling to help control how much you're releasing and how you're responding, you've got to learn how to control that emotional response. You've got to learn how to control anxiety, and know what your triggers are, know how to relax. So we can modify it. And you want to know how your levels should be too. So we want higher cortisol in the morning. Like I said, cortisol is your awakening response that gets you up in the morning.
right?
So knowing how to use cortisol to your advantage. Like I mentioned, exercise releases cortisol. It is great to go exercise first thing in the morning because we want that higher cortisol level that wakes us up, that gets us going, that makes us feel good and sustains us throughout the day.
Yeah.
We don't really want high cortisol at 10 o'clock at night when we're trying to go to sleep, because it's going to keep us too stimulated. So I'll never tell somebody not to exercise. If the only time you can go is 8 o'clock, then do it because we need to exercise. But you've got to calm back down afterwards. But ideally, your best exercise time is going to be in the morning. Use that to your benefit. Use that to help boost your energy for the rest of the day versus doing that and then going and laying in bed trying to go to sleep whenever you're all amped up still.
I've found that with sleep, eating late too. Also, it sets me back going to bed, a couple hours.
Yeah.
Just by eating an hour and a half, after I should.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
That's why we like that intermittent fasting setup where
Yeah.
you're not eating past 6 or 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Prepares your body for what it needs to do, which is go to bed. So other things that too much cortisol can do. Long-term, too much cortisol can increase blood pressure, increase blood sugar levels, which can actually lead to type 2 diabetes, weight gain. It increases cravings, which also contributes to the weight gain. You crave like higher carb foods. There was actually a study that showed that women who were under chronic stress had higher caloric intakes and were more likely to be overweight. So dual effect there, partly from the high blood sugar levels, but partly just from you crave more, you eat more.
Yeah, it just feels like there is a cycle I'm seeing. And the way you're talking about cortisol, there's a real negative cycle to this if you're not careful.
If you're not careful, that's the thing. We want it, but we got to be careful with it. Like I said, it suppresses immune system, also can cause digestive issues. But on the flip side of that, not enough cortisol is not good either. We've talked about this before. I have a video on it. Not enough cortisol is adrenal fatigue. So we're going to be very tired. We can have low blood pressure, brain fog. Refer back to the adrenal fatigue video, but a lot of times you just have these midday crashes, like you just can't even make it through the day. So we need the balance there. We want to have the appropriate cortisol response whenever we want it, and we need to know how to shut it off whenever we don't want it.
We talk a lot about hormones, and the key with hormones is balance.
Yeah,
And cortisol, of course, is a hormone, and same thing with cortisol.
Got to balance it.
Got to balance.
So how to keep that regulated? We need to lower stress. And I tell people this all the time, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Easy to say, not so easy to do. But whenever we know that we're having an inappropriate cortisol response, we've got to figure out our way to bring it down. Mine tends to be prayer, meditation, yoga, things like that, where it just brings it down. You center your mind. You think about something else. You're getting rid of everything else in the environment. Exercise is a really good one for me as well. Put your headphones in, listen to some good music, really get that good exercise in. That's a good stress reliever for me. Some people, it's taking a hot bath, read a book, things like that. We don't want to use alcohol as stress reliever. I know everybody, it's been a hard day, go home and have a glass of wine, but that actually tends to complicate the picture more. We don't want to use alcohol for that. Getting more sleep. Also easy to say, not so easy to do. But 7 to 9 hours of sleep really is going to help allow the cortisol levels to reset the way that they need to. They're supposed to be low when we go to bed, get lower, and then start to rise in the morning, and that's what wakes us up. But if we're going to bed and waking up every 2 hours, or we're only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep, we're not resetting appropriately. So it's going to cause some dysregulation there.
Makes so much sense.
Exercise, again, I already said exercise, but daily exercise, even getting out and going for a walk, is really beneficial for stress relief. Like I said, avoiding excess alcohol intake, also excess caffeine intake. And I think I probably talked about that with adrenal fatigue, but you get in this vicious cycle of I'm tired, so I'm going to drink caffeine, but the caffeine actually ends up making the situation worse.
Right.
So looking for other things to help besides just 10 cups of coffee a day. Cleaning up your diet. You really are what you eat. And if you eat junk, you feel like junk. So eating a good, clean, whole foods diet, not eating a lot of processed foods, staying away from the high carbs, the high sugars. When you do that, even for a couple weeks, and then you fall back to a not so good diet, that's when you really notice the difference. If you eat really clean and then you have something that you shouldn't really be having, almost immediately, most people, it's some anxiety or feeling depressed, tired, just blah. So food really has a big effect on what's happening with your cortisol levels. And then there's herbs and supplements that we really like for helping to regulate levels. So adaptogenic herbs are my favorite, just to help the body regulate on its own. So these would be things like ginseng, ashwagandha, rhodiola are all really good adaptogenic herbs. I get more specific when I have patients that have very specific complaints. If we know we're too high or we know we're too low, there's other things I throw in there. But these are good ones across the board that can be helpful for anybody.
So adaptogenic herbs, when I hear adaptogenic, it's adapting. I know we've talked about it.
Yeah.
Remind me one more time.
Well, it's not purposely forcing levels up or down. It's just helping the body cope with what's going on.
That's right. Okay.
So they're good for too high cortisol and they're good for too low.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Super cool. This is such an important topic. I know stress is something that we talk a lot about this time of year, in the winter time when we're filming this. But cortisol is also a good thing. So you need that balance.
We need it. So know your levels, get your levels checked. Time of day for drawing those levels is very critical. I prefer to time it pre 10 a.m. because that's when I want cortisol to be high.
Now, is this the saliva test?
We do have a saliva test for it as well.
Okay.
So
blood and saliva.
Yeah, blood and saliva. So in the blood test, I prefer to draw it pre 10 a.m. because that's a reliably high level. Should be somewhere between 10 and 20 if drawn before 10 a.m.
Okay.
If drawn late in the afternoon, it's like 3 to 10. It's a lot lower. The saliva test is something that we will go to if I see some dysregulation, if I'm really suspicious, especially of adrenal fatigue.
Got it.
I'll go to that. And so the saliva test is a 4-time collection that you collect saliva first thing in the morning, before lunch, before dinner, before bed. And we look to see what your curve looks like. Should be nice and high in the morning, come down in the afternoon and evening. And so if we've got some dysfunction there, we can have a flipped curve. We can have it really too high, way too low. We've got all kinds of things that can happen there.
With the blood draw, are you telling patients they need to same day get morning and afternoon, or?
I usually stick to just morning with a blood draw.
Okay, so just morning.
Yeah.
Not worried about the evening. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Super cool. It's such an important topic. And is there anything else you want to tell listeners about cortisol? Anything else we need to go with?
Don't stress it.
Don't stress it.
If you stress about your cortisol levels, you're going to make your cortisol levels higher. So don't stress it. But get with someone who can help you. Learn how to control what's happening in your body. That way you can feel your best.
Don't stress about your cortisol level, guys. That will not work. Robin, I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Guys, this has been another episode of Explain This. You name it, we explain it. Today's topic was cortisol. Go back in the description. We'll link a link to our YouTube video on what is it?
Adrenal fatigue.
Adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue in the description below. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. This has been Explain This. I'm with the star of the show, Robin Riddle. You name it, we explain it. See y'all later. Don't go away.